Welcome everybody here. We're going to have, first of all, let me introduce you, the fellow gentlemen that composed this panel. We have here Paul Donahan, who is the sporting director of Inter Miami FC. We have Domingos Soares de Oliveira, CEO of Benfica Group and also member of the board of the ECA, the European Club Association. We have Richard Muskin, one of the most experienced agents and lawyers in sports law in America since the beginning, the creation of the Major League Soccer. And we have also Steve Calzada that we're going to bring us, first of all, in the beginning of this roundtable, where we want to discuss, we're going to target the issues, the challenges, and the interests of the entire world of football in America's football or soccer market. Before that, we're going to hear, so from Steve, I give you the floor to make this presentation, which is going to be the canvas for us to analyze all the issues that we are offering you.
Good afternoon, everybody. And once again, thank you, Soccerex, for having us around. It's obviously been a great event. It's also an interesting challenge to present ahead of a lovely weekend in Miami. So we hope we will come up with something that you guys find interesting. What I intend to present today, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Soccerex football transfer review in collaboration with Soccerex. We've been doing it for the last 10 years. And over the last 5 years, we have this wonderful partnership with Soccerex, in which we do not just this report together, but also we do an under-21 report that normally goes on the summer with very good acceptance in the industry. Normally, what we do is football transfer review is about European industry, and we analyze the transfer activity twice a year, every time that the transfer window shuts, both summer and winter, and we focus on the 5 European leagues. So when David from Soccerex mentioned that we would have the opportunity to talk to the American audience, we thought it would be a great idea to come up with a short special edition based on the Americas. And what we're doing today is to go through what has happened lately in the top 5 American football leagues, which includes the MLS, Mexican League, Colombian League, Brazilian League, and Argentinian League. So those would be the leagues that we would consider the top 5 American leagues. And what we want to do is to have a quick review of what happened in the transfer activity in these leagues, and ultimately compare it with what happened in Europe. And that's meant to be the basis of subsequent conversation that we'll have all together. The report is 100% open and available in our website, primetimesport.com. So feel free to download it, and there's no need for you to take notes. So just as a reminder, we focus on the activity that happens both in winter and summer transfer windows, and we only take into consideration fixed amounts of the transfers, regardless of other commissions or other third-party agreements that there could be in some of the deals. So let's have first an initial look to the size of the expenditure in each of these American leagues. This is actually a very interesting exercise. This is the first time we've done it, and interestingly enough, the Mexican league, what we keep on hearing that many of the owners complain that running a football club is a money-losing operation, but we still find that the Mexican league is the most prominent, the most active in terms of investment in new players, followed by the Argentinian league, the Brazilian league, and then the MLS and the Colombian league. But interestingly enough, this is pretty much the rank in terms of which American leagues are more proactive in terms of bringing players along. Then in terms of which were the most expensive signings, so which were the teams, that spent most money over the last in the last transfer window, we will obviously find most of it being Mexican teams, led by Monterrey, that spent these 22 million euros, and Cruz Azul and some other Mexican clubs here, as well as some clubs from Brazil and other of the leagues. But in terms of expenditure, we can say that the most prominent and active American league is the Mexican league. When it comes to sales, it's no surprise to anyone that normally what we will find is both Brazilian and Argentinian leagues that being like the most active. And we all know about this recurrent activity and probably main source of business for the clubs in both Brazilian and Argentinian leagues. So in there we've been seeing, and it keeps on happening, that Brazil leads the way in terms of player sales. So we've seen this roughly 200 million euros in income, which obviously are very important for Brazilian clubs to be run, and then followed by the sales by Argentinian teams. In terms of net spending, obviously, this is where we look at the difference between the amount spent in player signings with the amount collected from player sales. So those that have negative investment are obviously those leagues in which sales are bigger than money spent. So here we see, as a consequence of the number that we've seen before, we see Brazilian and Argentinian teams in a negative mode in terms of collecting more money from sales. And then we've got the other leagues that are pretty much break even, including both MLS and Mexican league in terms of also revenues. The most expensive players in Europe, in America, just keep these numbers in mind. 15 million paid by, this is euros by the way, 15 million paid by Monterrey to bring in Pizarro, 12 million paid by Flamengo in Brazil to bring along Vitinho. The most relevant transfers, when we look at the transfers between America and Europe, this is something that we've seen in the past, probably much more activity in this respect, but still we have now found a new strategy by both Barcelona and Real Madrid. They both, not just these two teams, but any big team now, considering that it's very expensive to get a top player for your team. Everyone is in the hunt of the next Neymar. So we are now seeing high-profile transfers and for players that are still teenagers that are costing more than 40 million euros, including the fact that Real Madrid brought in Vinicius, and at the beginning of the season with the previous manager was not even playing the first team, but in the second team, which is playing in Spanish third division. So this is some of the activity that we've seen in terms of players moving from America to Europe. Let's put this in context and compare it with Europe. Some of you, those of you that are familiar with Football Transfer Review, will already know the numbers. This was presented back in September, but it's no news to anyone that the most powerful league is the Premier League, and it's spending in excess of 1 billion euros bringing in new players. This is a huge number, followed by the Italian Serie A, where we have started to see a recovery in the investment. So we've seen 3 years in a row in which Italian teams are investing more and more. Obviously here we have the impact of the transfer from Real Madrid to Juventus of Cristiano Ronaldo. But Premier League is clearly leading the way, and in total we're talking about an amount of in excess of 4 billion euros spent in transfers, as opposed to around 200 million spent in top 5 American leagues. The teams that spend most this summer, obviously led by Juventus because of having brought in Cristiano Ronaldo, but then we've seen a lot of interesting movements in Europe, especially seeing Liverpool reinvesting the money that had been collected from selling Coutinho to FC Barcelona and allowing them to spend a whopping 75 million euros to bring along a goalkeeper, right? Which means that at the end of the day, the most expensive, if we look at the top 10 most expensive players of the summer, we can see that there are two goalkeepers showing up in this ranking, which is something that didn't happen in the past. And not just goalkeepers, but even central defenders have become very expensive and very demanded by top European clubs. Another interesting development, I'm almost done so that we can pass on and have this open discussion, is the impact that the financial fair play application is having on the way the European clubs are managed. And in the past, and we were used to see when we look at those teams that are more active in terms of selling players, we would find teams like Sevilla, Benfica, obviously, Porto, Monaco, etc. Monaco is still there. Benfica is normally there in the top 10, top 15, and we can talk about this with Domingos later. But more importantly and more interestingly, we were not used to see Barcelona, Real Madrid, PSG in the ranks of top selling teams. And this is definitely a consequence of the financial fair play. When you want to invest in players, you also have to sell players. And that it doesn't matter if you are a bigger team or smaller team, but every top team also has to deliver on financial fair play. And as a consequence, we have started to see the top teams showing up in the top 10 or in the rankings as of those teams collecting most money from player sales. So just as a final, oops, I'm missing one slide here. Sorry. For some reason, there's one slide that is not here. But just to finish the presentation, in terms of the total numbers, in Europe, we're talking about an amount in excess of 4 billion spent in new players, as opposed to America, where we're talking about a number of above 200 million spent in new players. Obviously, the difference is huge. And this is also something that we can discuss about. Obviously, America is catching up. We have a great Copa Libertadores final. We have very exciting MLS playoffs ahead in the coming weeks, and I'm sure we will see an interesting development in this growth as well. So this is all for me for now. So I'm just going to join the table and we can have a conversation. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Steve. As I said, I think it's based on this explanation that is broader than just appreciate the American market, but also jump into a comparison with the European big leagues and also go to Argentina, Colombia, Mexico, and Brazil. Based on that, and I think we could begin from that, we just had the announcement, at least as the internet, and I think the figures are more or less like that, right? Richard, that Pity Martinez from River Plate has just been sold, and he's going to play in the Major League Soccer from January. Fortunately for us, they're from international.
Allegedly, right?
Allegedly, yes. It's in the press, at least. Pity Martinez is a great guy. He scored against Grêmio, which is my rival back in Brazil, 1 week ago, and that's why River Plate is in the finals with Boca Juniors, which is going to be an amazing match. But based on that, it was, according to the news, it was a 15 million euros or approximately $20 million deal, which means that the American market is also buying, not only investing in cheap or beginners, but also putting a lot of money on that. So can you give us, Richard, your first impression about the evolution of the market since you are dealing with it since its beginning of the Major League Soccer with
Sure.
an important role on that?
Yeah, no, I think it's, first off, great presentation. Well done. And I would say, yeah, it's good to have some historical context for where MLS is today. And I think simplistically, what I would sort of say was look at the first 10 years, the second 10 years, and now we're in the third 10 years of the league. And in many respects, the league is evolving and transforming right before our eyes. And, you know, consistent with the growth of the sport in this country, you know, the transfer market has changed as well. When the league started, I'd say for the first decade, it was a growing league. It was beginning to find its feet, and they were never paying any money for players. They were looking for free players, and in all honesty, they weren't transferring too many players. I mean, you know, for many years, the biggest transfer coming into MLS was actually Landon Donovan coming back from Bayer Leverkusen, and at that time, the league collectively spent approximately $3 million to buy Landon back, and I think this was in 2003 or somewhere in that vein. And for many years, that was still sort of the biggest transfer coming back into MLS. And slowly, sort of in the second 10 years of the league, you had one big transfer, which was Josie Altidore going to Villarreal. And you had maybe a few players who were coming in, and that was about a $10 million transfer. And you had, you know, maybe a few players who were coming in for in and around $1 million, and a few players who were transferring out to places like Portugal and England and Holland and Belgium. But again, these were, for the most part, I would say, you know, in the couple $1 million range max either way. And now over the last 5 years, you've seen a really big transformational shift, and I think it's a combination of, you know, the growth of the sport, getting owners who are very invested, and we'll talk a little bit later about, you know, how you build a team in this league, and Paul's going to have some good comments on that, and, you know, how this league really is, you know, some owners are really taking a big step, like Atlanta United, to invest heavily in player transfers, both in and out, and, you know, there are mechanisms in place that you're going to see a differentiation in terms of how teams look to build their rosters, what sort of resources that they're going to commit to it. But going back, say, about 5 years ago, you had the first wave of sort of significant transfers in, which were guys like Dempsey and Bradley and Jermaine Defoe, where you're talking about $5 million plus. And those were more established players to help grow and build the league. And now what you're having in the last couple of years is teams saying, you know what, we will spend $10+ million on an Almiron, a Barco, but we're doing it with the idea of buying them, having them develop here, play a couple years, and then sell them for, you know, hopefully multiples of what you paid for. And that's a paradigm shift and a new model, but that will also bring credibility to the league. You know, if Almiron gets sold at the end of the year and goes over to Europe and does well, that will benefit MLS. That will give MLS more credibility because, one, they could say they developed the player, and two, you know, if teams now are spending $25-30 million to buy a player from MLS and they do well over there, that will then have, you know, transformative effects down the road.
And I think you agree that possibly, allegedly, Pity Martinez is coming because allegedly Almiron might go somewhere. So you buy and you sell it. Paul, your thoughts about the evolution and particularly how much and the significance of the increase in the value also of the franchises, which we know that is, even if you can give us we were speaking about that, in comparison to an American investor like the Glazers in the past and so on, it's cheaper, what's the approach to have a club here or to have another club abroad to use as a bridge, as a channel to sell players in Europe particularly? I don't know, how do you see that?
Well, I think it's important, and I'm going to speak because I just came from Atlanta and we kind of did this whole buying process. We went into it thinking traditionally teams were going in and they were buying $5-6 million a year players because they needed the marketing. In Atlanta, we didn't think we needed that. And when you looked at it amortized out over 5 years, you're saying $25 million. So the budget we had for Almiron was $25 million. So we went down and we paid, you know, $10 million for him. We paid $5.5 million for Joseph Martinez. They came in and did really well, and we knew that the resale value would be there for Almiron. So what we did then was we went and we saw the value to go get a kid like Barco. And Barco's transfer was $18 million. Still $26 million amortized. So the important part is when you don't need it for marketing, you can get good players in that you can develop and then you can sell, very much like the better clubs in the world, right? But you have to have resourced owners. And I think the league has done a really good job of bringing in owners that have the money. And you see New York City FC, LA, Atlanta, Miami.
Toronto.
Yeah, Toronto's been in, but these guys went in and bought young. Horta to LAFC was on that trend. Medina to New York City. So that trend is going that way, that owners are ambitious, they understand the risk, and they're prepared to put up money for the long term. I think when you start to look at why owners are coming to the MLS has done a really good job of driving value, keeping things in check. Whereas if you wanted to go buy an NFL franchise, it's $3 billion. Atlanta came in, they bought the franchise for 70. It just came out at Forbes, was valued in 2 years at 350 million. It's a great investment for good owners.
Yeah. Let me shift a little bit and give the floor to Domingos. We know that Benfica is a traditional institution in forming young players, and is also breaking records all over the years in regards to figures involved in transfers. How do you use the base with the young players to fulfill your needs, technically speaking, and also to supply your financial needs? And on the same line, we know that Benfica is interested, have an eye here in the American market. Why is that? What you want to bring? What you want to take from the American market? What's the idea behind that?
Well, thank you, Daniel. First of all, I think that you have to understand that for an European club, selling players is not part of our mission. Our mission is to win. Now, we are competing in a very difficult market because we are competing not only against the Portuguese clubs, but also against the Real Madrid, Barcelona, Man United, Man City, etc. So we have to generate additional revenue, not only from the three usual streams, which is match day, sponsorship, and TV rights. And we were obliged to create an additional line in terms of generating revenues. That's the reason why we started 10 years ago, most probably 12 years ago, thinking that developing young players and selling them to the market was essential in order to generate more revenues and to be able to pay the right wages, the right salaries to keep the best players. Now, what we did is we create our own academy 12 years ago, and we invest heavily in terms of scouting. Scouting is essential because if you don't have the raw material with the right quality, it's impossible to develop an average player and to transform it as a big player. In terms of the youth development, coaches are essential. We invest a lot in terms of coaches and training coaches. And part of our strategy today is not only to have those coaches in Portugal, but to be able to send them to the markets that are abroad, and they are important. And the third one is the ability to transform these young players in very good players, not only in Benfica, but outside Benfica. You mentioned we have very good figures. In the last, since 2010, we sold more than 700 million euros in players. 250 million were generated by players that were nurtured in Benfica since they were 8 years old. So that's really very impressive in terms of the figures, and you have to consider that Portugal is a very small country. We have 10 million inhabitants, so it's really small. Now, we reach a position today where we no longer depend on selling players. Okay, we have a very good financial situation, which means that we will sell depending on the strategy we have around each player. If, for example, a player is today 20, 21 years old, we don't want to sell them. Okay, I had an offer from, for example, Olympique de Lyon, trying to buy a central defender who is 20 years old. They were ready to pay 30 million. And we said, no, we don't want to sell the player. We're ready to increase the salary, but we don't want to sell this player. Now, if the player was maybe 28 years old, we would be ready to sell even for a lower price. And that's part of the strategy. We will keep investing in terms of youth development, in terms of scouting, putting those players at the highest level. And just to give you some figures, Ederson, the goalkeeper of Man City, was in Benfica. We sold it for 40 million. We have Victor Lindelof, a Swedish guy. We sold it to Man United for 30. Nelson Smed, a guy that was nurtured in Benfica, we sold him for 30 million to Barcelona. So there's a lot of examples between players that we catch in Portugal and outside Portugal at the younger stage, and that are today in Juventus, in Bayern Munich, in Real Madrid, etc. So that's part of the story. Now, why are we here in the States? Because we believe that this is most probably the market that will have the strongest evolution in the next coming years. I think that if you look to the millennials, soccer is really the most important sport. And I think that you have done, especially the Americans have done a fantastic job in bringing soccer from almost a no sport in the States in the 90s until where it is today. Yeah. But I think that there's an opportunity here in terms of the leagues, in terms of the clubs, in terms of the academies, to develop on a better way those young players. So that's the reason why we are looking to America as an important market in terms of our strategy and ready to work with the most important stakeholders in this country.
Steve, I know you are probably one of the persons that I know that study more the markets and organize with a method, and thanks for the presentation, by the way, again. Do you agree with Domingos that the American market possibly is the most attractive? It's for foreign clubs, big clubs like Benfica, they want to be here, they need to be here. And do you see the American markets, let's say within a decade, competing in kind of figures, competing for players, to buy players with, for instance, the Mexican market, we all know that spends a lot of money buying South American players, for instance. Well, how do you see that?
I wish I had the answer. What will happen in 10 years' time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, from my Barcelona times, and even now, I was speaking yesterday with the managing director of FC Barcelona here in the States. I mean, America has always been a very difficult market to crack for European clubs. You know, I mean, it's obviously a huge market, but extremely competitive with other sports. And we've always been seeing these amazing practicing numbers that then were difficult to convert into competitive teams, right? Also, the way the league is set up it has some implications in terms of control by the league, salary caps, the amount that you can spend, etc., right? So every European club wants to come here. I think that other than coming on tour or opening up some schools, I couldn't talk about any specific success story in terms of a case study of a club which is very successful developing business here in the US. And yes, as for the MLS, of course, just like what Paul was saying, every franchise is increasing value, right? Yeah. I guess the question for the owners is, as far as I know, I mean, some of these teams, Atlanta, obviously, they put 50, 60,000 people watching the matches. But in other cases, some of these clubs are losing a significant amount of money every year, right? So I guess the question for those owners is how long are they prepared to be around injecting money into those clubs? But I do believe that the quality of the league is improving. Yeah. More players want to come here, and I believe that we would see sooner than later that MLS will be exporting players abroad. Yeah.
That brings me to another question, Paul, just beginning from you and then go to Richard again. We saw one of the transfers here that you mentioned, and it's amazing that a goalkeeper, almost 80 million, was Alisson, that was formed in Internacional from Porto Alegre, the club that I worked for the last 18 years. We are proud about the formation. We had Tafarel, we had Dunga, we have Pato, Grêmio, our rival, I'll give you that. They have Ronaldinho Gaúcho and plenty. Now they have Artur that went to, it's a great player that's in Barcelona. So we have this tradition. And we also heard from Domingos that you have players that were raised and formed by Benfica since they were 8. And the profile of the players that entitled the American franchises to earn money are foreign players that came here young from, like Almiron, like Pity Martinez is coming, not that young. But how long do you think you can see like really talented players that could compete in a big league that are really formed, were born in US, and like a new generation, like I know it's a different culture. You share the space with many other modalities that are really strong, like basketball, baseball, and so on, is different from us in South America and Europe. Somehow that football is almost 90%. So how do you see that? Is something that you are trying to achieve, or the model is actually approach younger players abroad that you can bring them more with less expenses? I don't know. How do you see that?
No, I think of course you want to develop your own players. And I think if you look at some of the teams in the league that are doing it well, we're starting to see a little bit more of it. Dallas has actually been a really good exporter of their homegrown players, but they put a lot of money and emphasis into their academy. New York Red Bulls sold Matt Miazga to Chelsea. Tyler Adams is going to go right to Germany. So I think with the resourced owners that are coming into the league, developing homegrown players has become very, very important. Now, when are we going to get someone that can go play in the top leagues? We're a ways off. You know, guys are playing. Weston McKennie's doing a great job in the Bundesliga, but to play in the English Premier League, we're a ways off. You just needed to watch the game yesterday to see we have a lot of work to do, but the ambition and the resources are there, that the clubs are starting to invest more money to develop players, bring them through to the first team, and then hopefully move them on.
Yeah, and I would just add, I think it's only a question of when, not if, right? It's just like everything else, you know. And Dominguez said it well in what he said. In the 1990s, which was only 20 plus years ago, soccer was nothing in this country. No. Literally, it was nothing. And you look at, you know, the billion, you know, all the billionaires who are coming and investing in the sport. You look at this conference, and you know, things take time, right? We're all impatient. We want everything to happen. And by the way, Alphonso Davies, who's a homegrown for Vancouver, just got sold for 15 plus million to Bayern Munich. Now we'll see how he does. But again, he's a Vancouver developed player who just got sold for big money. So he is a homegrown talent. And you know, Paul mentioned Weston McKennie. He was developed by Dallas. And so, you know, at the end of the day, you're going to see over time more players have opportunities, more players, you know, whether it's domestic or international, and it will happen, you know, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, but, you know, and again, it also is what is a specific club's philosophy, right? Do we want to develop and sell? Do we want to develop and keep? And that comes, marketing comes into that as well. So it's going to be a club-by-club situation, but it will, over time, start happening more and more.
Yeah, Domingos, I was amazed yesterday by speaking with Richard and Paul that I realized that the figures or the value, the market value of the franchises here can reach to the sky, like $3.5 billion a franchise here, while at the same time a club in England, like, please, I don't want to be blamed by any English, but it's just a source to less than $500,000 to buy, for instance, Newcastle, which means that it's not a paradox, but it shows that the wealthy, the financial wealthy of the market is important here, although we can speak about the tradition of South America, Europe, but there's a lot of interest on that. How do you see that? Particularly, you are in the ECA. How do you see this approach of American investors like the Glazers? It is pointless for someone that has a club here in U.S. also try to build a bridge. We know Gino Pozzo has Granada, and also at the same time Udinese, and he's doing a great job in Watford. So this model of having different clubs placed in different scenarios could be useful somehow. Depends. How do you see that?
Well, I call it a constellation of clubs. Okay, and this is something that it's already reality. You mentioned the Watford case, but there are very good examples like Man City, who has clubs in New York, in Sydney, and the way they are managing these different clubs is a little bit different from the clubs where they want to spread their know-how and their brand, compared to clubs, for example, they own in Uruguay, where what they're trying to get is an easy access to the talent at the right moment. So it's a little bit different. But I think that we go on this direction, and in fact, we, Benfica, we are studying this possibility. Now, when you are playing in the same region, like, for example, the Red Bull, they have two teams, one in Germany and the other one in Austria, competing at the same time in Europa League, it's a little bit more complicated, but it's manageable. And I think that, in fact, the most important clubs, they have a so strong know-how in terms of the industry that I think they should take advantage of that and to spread this know-how for the clubs. That's the first, most important point. The second one, coming back to your previous question to Richard and Paul, I think that you have in the States the most important fact. You have the critical mass. Okay, you have, I think, 4 million players who are registered in the federation. You have 20 million players who play soccer on a regular basis. And so if you have the critical mass, for sure you will find here talent. That's for sure. You just need to develop it a little bit. We have some experience, for example, in China, where we have some schools. And our coaches that we have in China, they say the quality is there. You just have to find it. And you couldn't think about a single Chinese player who could succeed in Europe, but it's coming.
Yeah.
So I think that the opportunity is here. I think that the figures for the franchise are, for an European perspective, it's a little bit complicated to understand, because I see the prices for clubs like Chelsea that are a little bit in the press. I will not comment on that. But Chelsea, compared to some clubs here in America, it's a little bit difficult to understand why they have the same price.
Yeah.
Now, if the investors are investing, it's because they want some return. Yeah. And in UK, it's a little bit different. Some of the investors, they're trying to get recognition more than to make a normal investment with a return on the investment.
Right. Steve, any thoughts on that? Taking advantage of your former position in Barcelona to as a big club.
And I can the M&A market in European football is extremely busy at the moment, and just like I mean, what's happening now, we're talking about Newcastle. I mean, we know that Mike Ashley has been in the market to try to sell the club, but I guess he didn't find the right amount of money for him to make, and actually this is an interesting situation as an owner, because it's a club which is extremely successful financially, but he's probably the most unpopular owner in the Premier League, right? And fans don't care about a profitable club, but obviously they want a club that is successful on the pitch. What we're seeing now is the fact that because of the prices of the English clubs being basically rocketing, we have started to see in Spain a lot of overseas investors that come in light of improved TV rights deals, financial control by the league, in a way that now La Liga has become an extremely regulated market. Yeah. And as a result of that, we've seen Ronaldo buying Valladolid as a recent example, and there's a lot of movement in there, in light of the clubs being more profitable. So I guess this is something that we will continue to see. Even one of the shareholders of Soccerex has invested in a French club. It's something that it's happening more and more, and just like any other industry, we'll see that money will come into the system, and not necessarily only for recognition. Now you can see investors that think like, I can make money out of this investment, not just because I want to be in the media or because I want to do parallel business, but just because the value of these clubs are increasing, and maybe I buy for a specific amount now, and I can sell it in 3 years' time for twice the value.
Yeah. Well, let's make it more controversial a little bit, shall we? The thing is, it's clear that we're speaking about transfers, we are speaking about increasing of the figures of selling and buying in the American market, which means that clearly the growth of the market is related to an interaction with the entire world. Let's say it's. I think that also the American football, the American soccer it's more accessible, and it's trying to open the window and go to more regular practice that we have abroad, to compete with our prices, or to approach clubs, to approach young players in South America and Africa, try to build scouting and so on. So, being this said, what amazed me is that when I think first time I faced this problem was we were dealing with a problem with a Brazilian player, And we were analyzing the possibility for him to terminate the contract with Just Cause. He simply didn't want to accept the unilateral option that is an ordinary method here applied in US and is not accepted by FIFA. We also know that I haven't seen in the last 18 years working before as a litigator in FIFA and the Court of Arbitration for Sports, I haven't seen a single award telling an American club to pay training compensation, which all of us, Benfica, Internacional, Grêmio, Barcelona, all of us are used to pay and to collect. So how, beginning from you, there are locals here, Paul and Richard, how do you see that coming? Because when I analyzed the possibility of that case that I've just mentioned, it was the standard contract of Major League Soccer was shocking to me. Because in Brazil, we also think that some FIFA rules, particularly the ones that establish the transfer windows, are very harmful for the Brazilian football. Very harmful, but let's go to that. So we also have things that we don't agree with FIFA rules, but we abide by them. So I was shocked when I saw in the standard contract that was exposed in the website of Major League Soccer saying, Article X of FIFA rules doesn't apply. Article Y of FIFA rule doesn't apply. So how do you feel that it will be accommodated? Do you think in the end, the American clubs, players, and institutions in general will have to adopt and to comply with these rules, or how do you see that coming? Because I cannot see how you can be a real player within the worldwide if we have, on the other side, so strict rules that are applying, particularly in Europe with financial fair play. So it's another level of requirement to follow every and all FIFA rules, especially concerning the ones that are on the financial nature.
Next question.
No, come on.
We don't have time to get into most of this stuff, but what I'll say is a couple. I mean, you're a lawyer, I'm a lawyer, there's plenty of lawyers in here, and so
I'm not a lawyer.
the very short answer to a very long and complicated question is the professional sports leagues in America are structured differently than they are everywhere else in the world. So, you know, traditionally, historically, everywhere else in the world, you had promotion relegation, you had a system that was created that had teams going up, teams going down. There were member clubs, there are clubs that were owned by villages and towns, and you know, and still to this day, a lot of European clubs don't have owners like we do here. It's really their memberships. And so, whereas here in America, you know, as a starting point, but, you know, the leagues that are structured as, you know, there is a top league. We don't have promotion relegation. Taking it to today, if you're asking an MLS owner to come in and spend $400 to $500 million for an expansion fee and building a stadium, you know, this notion that a year from now they could get relegated to a lower division, you're not going to have too many people stepping up who are going to put in that kind of capital to find out that, you know, within 1 or 2 years' time their investment's worth, you know, 1/100th of that amount. So it's not the way we're structured. So it's sort of a historical structural issue. And then in addition, as lawyers, you know, there's U.S. law, right? And so the way, you know, there are certain things, whether it's labor law, whether it's employment law, whether it's, you know, the U.S. law will still trump in, you know, FIFA regulations. And so, you know, what happens as a result of all this is there is this, you know, coexistence that FIFA allows the U.S. structure, the U.S. league to operate with some differences because, listen, ultimately, as a result of the way the league was structured, as a result of the growth, soccer's growing in America, which helps the global game in many different ways. And so, you know, listen, short term, you're not going to have promotion relegation here. Short term, some of the things will get more and more in line with FIFA rules and regulations. Because, listen, I think ultimately, the more consistency there is, the better it is for everybody. Mm-hmm. But there are certain things that, that's the way that this was created, and it's not really going to change in the short term.
Got to put my league hat on. No, I think the best message to come out of it, for the first 20 years of MLS, nobody cared.
Yeah.
The league is evolving, and we're aware that we need to evolve as the league grows. So these are challenges that come to us as we grow and evolve. And the fact that we have these issues, they're good problems for us to have.
Yeah.
But they're things that have never happened for the first 25 years of the league. So we need to evolve.
Yeah.
But we're getting better, which is good.
And, and with challenges, there's opportunities as well, right? So you
For
touched
lawyers?
on it. No, for everybody, right? So you
Agents.
talk about training comp and solidarity payments, which is a complicated issue. For the first 20 plus years, the league didn't care. But now as you're developing players and they're going overseas, you want to participate in that.
But let me build on.
Let me just, I'm going to give you the floor, but just to keep the hot issue, okay? I agree that if you are, is it okay? Oh no,
It's better now.
okay. This is my brother. Thank you, Felipe. So I agree with you. If you are limiting a possible discussion in regards to a termination of contract within US, that's fine. I can do that in Brazil also. Many years I can find a judge that ruled with the constitution against FIFA rules. I've done that, not me, but in Brazil, many people did that for 20 years. But the problem is that when you have a 4-year unilateral options in favor of an American club and Benfica wants your player, and Benfica will apply and will ask FIFA to say that these unilateral options are not valid and enforceable under FIFA rules. So this player catch a flight, go to FIFA and challenge his release before the player statute. So I want your thoughts if you think that if America wants to be part of it, because as I said, all and every stakeholders, I mean, federations we know that in France they also have some strict rules, and so that's the problem when we go to an international dimension of a transfer, of an approach, better said, an approach of a player that is in this precarious situation in regards to unilateral options. I don't know what you think about that. If you have to approach a player that is in this situation.
I think that Rich is right. The system here is different from the European. Yeah. And if you try to do business here and to apply the same rules that we have in Europe, in the States, you will fail. You have to recognize that those clubs that exist today, they don't have more than 100 years of history like we do. Yeah. So we have a system that was in place and is in place for many, many years. Here, I think that there's a real concern to protect the investors. That's the first thing. In Europe, no one is concerned about the guys who are investing money, because if they lose, they lose. If they win, they win. But I don't see any rules protecting the investors. In fact, when UEFA brought the basic idea of the financial fair play, it's a little bit to discipline the clubs, but not to protect the investors. So that's the first thing. Don't bring the European rules to European or eventually in other continents, but to the United States. The second thing is that I think that it should be a concern for the clubs here who invest in youth development to have these kind of protection mechanisms in terms of being paid if someone takes a player from you. I had the experience of having big clubs in Europe coming to Benfica, taking a player who was at the time 15 or 16 years old, with some mechanism that it's not totally legal, but they won. And in fact, they pay us something like 1 million euros. It's unacceptable because we are the ones who take the risk. We are the ones who invest. In Portugal and in Europe, if you have a good player in your academy, the parents are not paying, so all the investment relies on the clubs. So I think that in order to change something here in the States, it depends on the clubs. Those who invest in youth development, they should try to change the rules in order to get the return on investment they're doing with young players.
Okay, we're going to have a last round with 1 minute each one of you, and then we're going to give the floor to the audience if you want to make any questions or considerations. So, Steve, beginning from you. Any free agenda?
Interesting.
That was not part of the
I
program.
will just
Free thinking here.
No, we don't want that.
I will just open up a new topic briefly, which we were commenting with the other panelists before. I mean, obviously, I want to talk briefly about agents, right? Because when we see these numbers, 4 billion euros, in transfers, the more money there is in transfers, the more money there is in agents, right? We were just we are. I am an agent myself as well, and sometimes we feel like I mean, there's all this debate in the public opinion that agents make too much money. You know, this is insane, it would be interesting to know what you guys think about the fact that now.
Who says that?
Everyone says that agents are making too much money, that are greedy, not professional, etc. The thing is that there's few agents. I mean, I always say that probably 5% of the agents make 95% of the money, and because of 5% of the agents, we find that there are regulations that are put in place to address those 5% of people that make a lot of money from some transactions. And actually, we were saying before that if this money is made, is because people at the clubs allow this money to be made. But the thing that is not fair, I would say, as a human agent, let's put it this way, is the fact that now they talk about reducing more and more the percentage. When you sit down in front of a family, try to sign a representation contract, and you go like, listen, we would like to have a 5%, 10%, and they go like, no, but FIFA says 3%. I can tell you that 3% on a salary of 200,000 euros doesn't pay for the work that it means to take care of that player. So I would like to know, I'm asking a question actually to you guys. I mean, how do you see this?
Well, Rich has to leave, get on his private jet, go to his house in the Cayman Islands.
The rule was made. The rule was made for him.
I did not
This is
do
all,
the
it all
Pogba.
came back to Rich.
Not even 5.
I did not do the Pogba deal, unfortunately. Two comments. One is, I don't mind regulation as long as all the stakeholders are being regulated. I think what happens, though, is that if all you do is, quote, pick on the agents, all you're doing is reinforcing this, false and negative perception that agents are the bad actors. When the truth is, look, in any business, in anything in life, I think the vast majority of people are good, but yeah, you have bad actors, and whether it's, at the league level, the club level, the players, et cetera. So for me, if you're going to regulate everybody so that there's consistency, and, I'm fine with that as a professional, because I do want business to be professionalized. So that's what I would say to that. And as just a random comment, what I would say is, both in life and business, prioritize relationships, because ultimately relationships matter more than anything.
Well, a comment on Esteve, and as a club's perspective, I have to say that agents are really important for our business, okay? I think that in the last couple of years, there's some stakeholders who try to make the agents the bad guys in the industry, but they are not. They are really important in terms of managing the relationship between clubs and players, managing the mentality of the player. They have a role almost like a father. And if you skip that and you try to avoid the role of the agents, I think that we will miss more than we will win.
I used to be an agent, so I can understand. I just think it's important, just like in anything else, you find people that you work well with, that understand, they're really good agents, and you're drawn to deal with them because it's honest and it's upfront and it's easy. And then you don't deal as much with agents that you find that you have a difficult time with. But yeah, 100% agents are super important to the process for building clubs.
Ladies and gentlemen, the floor is open if someone wants to address a question. I'm not. Do we have here, please?
Hello, everyone. I work for Flamengo in Brazil, and my question is to Dominguez because, as you said, Benfica as a club that is more and more becoming a former club, we have similar problems in Brazil in terms of the player. Many times he wants to go away. He dreams about playing in another club, European club, and even though Benfica is a giant club, there are clubs that are able to pay more money for them. So how do you treat that situation? And it, of course, makes your decision on when to sell the player. It impacts your decision. How do you treat that as well? Because in some cases, you simply, as far as I can understand, you cannot avoid it.
Well, there are two reasons why the players want to leave a club like Benfica, and eventually Flamengo would be the same. One is related with wages, with salaries. Okay, they want more money, and that's acceptable. I think that's normal, that's human, I would say. The second one is the big five leagues in Europe. They are much more attractive than the Portuguese league or I don't know, the Dutch league or the Belgium league. So it's about attraction and the way they are recognized if they play on those leagues. What we try to do, and what we have tried to do, is not to stop the player at the initial phase when he starts saying, I would like to go abroad, but to say, you have a career, and you have a career inside Benfica, and you will be better developed as a player and as a man if you stay with us for an additional 2, 3, 4 years. But yes, we accept that you want to go to Man City or to Man United. You will have that time. Let's discuss the way we can improve your salary. Let's discuss the way we can improve your youth development, because usually they're young. And you have the guarantee, almost a guarantee, that in 3, 4 years from now, you will be able to leave. Today we are successful in this situation. In fact, when a player is 18 years old, maybe 3 years ago, he would leave immediately. Today, he accepts to stay with us for an additional period. But you have to accept that. That's part of the rules. They want more money, it's acceptable, and they will want to be in the best leagues, and that's acceptable also.
Hello, my question is also for, you were mentioning revenue streams before, you mentioned match day, you mentioned TV rights, you mentioned transfers. I was wondering, at a historic club in Europe like Benfica that's not Real Madrid or Barcelona, what role does merchandising play? Is it more complementary, or is it a major income stream?
It's more complementary, and I think that today, I would say TV revenues are the most important stream for the majority of the clubs. Those 10, 12 clubs who are global clubs, and they get an additional amount of money from sponsorship and from merchandising. But for a normal club, I would say, which is the case of Benfica, TV rights are the most important one. And I think coming back to our discussion around the Americas, checking the figures from the clubs here, not only in the United States, but also in South America, I think there's a huge opportunity to increase the revenues, especially if you work properly the TV rights. I think that the deals that exist today around the markets can really have an improvement. Just to give you the example of Benfica, in 2013, we were collecting for our home matches 7.5 million euros. That was 5 years ago. We are collecting today 40 million. So it gives you the idea that there's a lot of room for improvement in terms of generating additional revenue, of course in TV rights and the other streams, but TV rights would be the most important one.
Thank you very much. Hola, Daniel. Congratulations for the moderation, and congratulations for selecting these topics, which I think are truly the heart of what football stands for. And I've been enjoying all the opinions and controversies that you have approached. But may I start by congratulating Benfica for the work that Benfica is doing in terms of training and education of players, forming new generations, giving them the chance to play in their main team at the top level. And I think this is a lesson of success that should be emulated by other clubs. Of course, I speak out of my experience. I've started in football, or soccer as you call it in this country, in 1993. I know what is to run a club, I know what is to run a league, I know what is to run an international organization. And I think the topics that you have discussed are truly significant and decisive. Not only to give us an idea about how much sport represents in terms of global appeal and revenue generation, but also the challenge that we have ahead of us. Agents, referred a while ago. 4 years ago, FIFA had the opportunity to make a real serious holistic reform in terms of agents and the access of the activity to the activity which is private in nature but serves the mission of public interest. And I could not disagree more with those who want a free-for-all approach for agents. In an industry that generates 35 billion euros annually, there is no room for improvisation. So the same way that there are requirements for clubs to participate in professional competitions, those who play such a vital mission, such as agents, deserve and require proper criteria and proper scrutiny. I presented proposals at the FIFA Club Football Committee, 90% of which were adopted, but 10% were not. And those 10% were the most crucial ones. I'll give you an example. A global clearinghouse for all international and domestic transfers. How do you know where's the money coming from and where's the money going to? You referred also to club ownership. Same example applies. Take my country, where you have foreign investment coming from Argentina, Brazil, Russia, you name it. Who are the ultimate beneficial owners of the clubs or the commercial societies? We know in some cases, but those are truly exceptions. So an industry which is cutting edge, which generates billions of euros and dollars every year, who wants public trust, needs to govern themselves not with criterion standards of the 19th century, but with the 21st century. I have the greatest respect for those who are in leadership positions, but the challenge is there and it's not easy and must be addressed. My friend Johnny was elected a few years ago with a mission to reform global football. I think the situation is now to have an independent global clearinghouse for all financial transactions, including players' transfers and club ownership investment, so that you know who is behind the investments, not an opaque offshore-based entity, but true people that love and have passion for the sport that gives them so much benefit. In terms of players' transfers, in terms of agents' regulations, in terms of club ownership, this was the question I would like to invite the people on the stage to comment. How do you see, you who are the key actors on the front row of professional football, is it time to have such a level of financial integrity and transparency in an industry that generates so much billions and drags so many and so much passion around the world? Question mark. Thank you.
Thanks, Emmanuel. You want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead, Daniel.
I feel comfortable to speak a little bit about that, especially here in America, because I'm very, very grateful for the job that the American authorities have done in regards to the FIFA gate or CONMEBOL gate. I worked on that. I'm partial because I was working as a lawyer that represented some Uruguayan clubs that somehow began a huge fight against Julio Grondona and Eugenio Figueiredo, the president and vice president of CONMEBOL by that time. And I think that not only the clubs, but also the governing bodies has to apply in a very straight ways the rules of compliance. It's not possible, and maybe here in US it's going to be easier because you have a high standard of compliance that comes from the corporative world. We don't have that in our old institutions in football in general, and you know that, Emmanuel. So I think we have to import, and football, as I said once before, I think that the money involved proves that the football in general is an adult, but is immature because cannot take care of itself. And the proof of that was the lots of prisons that we had. So we went to the bottle. We saw that the governing bodies were not prepared, and the level of impunity that came from the wrong notion of football family was amazing. Just to mention one thing, we are not speaking about laundering money or using the banking channels in a small island, I don't know where. people of CONMEBOL that did that, they came to America to do that here. So the lack of sophistication of that is strictly linked to the entirely inexistence of compliance of the rules. So we demand a lot from the clubs, and I think Domingos will agree on that, Paul will agree on that, all of us. We demand a lot from the clubs. We demand a lot of players, sometimes young players with 18 years old, with a very poor cultural and financial backgrounds. We demand from them behavior that maybe we demand in any other activity. When a man becomes 30 or 35, we demand from players with 18. But we ask so little from the governing bodies. We saw that in CONCACAF, we saw that in CONMEBOL, and we saw that in FIFA. So I'm not sure if the main idea that you brought, that having an independent, because I'm not sure is there anything that is independent in the world. I'm not sure. There's always something political driving forces, so I'm not really sure which kind of instrument we could use, but by far, that's for sure, we have to improve the control, especially in regards to the governing bodies. I don't know if you want to add something, and then David's not calling my attention yet, so I think we can, we're done. Just to finish this discussion, if you want to add something.
No, you go on.
Listen, I said earlier, I don't have any issue with regulation, right? I think, you know, most of the people who operate in the system are good people. They're people that are doing it in a professional way, in an ethical way, and in a competent way, you know. And so the more disclosure there is, the more, you know, the more opportunity there is for people to understand how the system works. I support that. I have no issue with that whatsoever. And so, you know, what does become problematic, and Esteve alluded to it earlier, is when you craft rules for a tiny percentage of bad actors that then have a negative impact on the majority. That's unreasonable and that's unfair. So, you know, I think things will continue to improve, things will continue to get better, but everything's a process. So.
Well, I appreciate the presence of all of you, and particularly, I'm going to miss this. I'm sorry that we didn't have more time to take advantage of the expertise, and I would like to ask for an applause for our guests. Steve.